away, doctora Rudecindo.
Thank you. And I'm putting a timer on to make sure that I stay on task. So thank you again. So what I wanted to do was part of this theme of empowerment and embracing, I think there's nothing more empowering than information and having accurate information. And if you recall, when I shared my story, if my mother did not have information, my story probably would have been a very different one. So what I wanted to share today was right now, again, there's a lot of misinformation, and I have to go back to Terry Steindorf. I love that you were so clear in saying that you have to make sure you're getting accurate information. So looking at .edu and .org. So today, what I wanted to share was information regarding how immigration and what's going on with ICE are actually affecting you in school. What New York State says and New York State Education Department, what they have said. So recently, Dr. Betty Rosa, who is our Commissioner of Education, and our Attorney General Letitia James actually did a joint statement regarding the safeguards that we have in our schools. And I actually work in this. So I am the assistant superintendent of the Beacon City School District. I'm very blessed that I work in a progressive school district where we have a community that protects our own. We protect all children in our families, and we see that diversity is actually a strength of ours and not an impediment. So I want to share this really for families so that you are not afraid to send your child to school and that you are not afraid to attend school. So I want to just go over a couple of things. I'm just going to share my slide and hopefully everyone can see my slide.
Yes,
Yes?
you're good to go.
Okay, perfect. All right. So when we talk about, we're going to start from the very beginning, enrollment and registration. In New York State, any children between the ages of 5 and 21 are entitled to a free and public education. And this was based on a Supreme Court case from 1982. You do not need to submit proof of citizenship in order to enroll your child. So I want to repeat that. You do not need to show proof of citizenship. You do not need a social security number to enroll your child in school. Our school system in New York State actually gives every child their own unique student ID number. We do not use social security numbers. The only thing that you would need in order to register your child is proof of where you live, and that could be a letter from your landlord. It could be a utility bill, so a cell phone bill, um, birth certificate, whatever you have that proves that your child was born. And if you have any educational record, so if your child attended school in another country, if they have a report card, so any information that will help the school place your child in an appropriate setting, that would be helpful. And it does not need to be in English. Schools actually have access to resources where we can translate documents. And we can translate documents in any languages from Urdu, Mandarin, Haitian Creole, Spanish. So please do not be afraid to bring in those documents because they're not in English. So I want to make that clear that you are entitled to enroll your child in school ages 5 to 21. And that includes any services that the schools offer, whether it's special education, whether it's English as a new language, whether it's intervention services, all that you are entitled to if you live in the state of New York. The next thing is collecting and accessing student information. So we actually have a federal law called the Family Education and Privacy Rights Act, and that's FERPA. And basically what that means, and what I'm sharing with you is the official language that you can find on the New York State Education website. So I took the same language and I just put it in a PowerPoint, and I'm just going to simplify it for everyone so you don't have to read it yourself. And what this says is, we as a school district cannot give out your family information without your permission. We could lose our licenses for doing that. So for example, someone can show up and ask for your address and your information. We are not allowed to give that information. We are not allowed to give your school records out. We are not allowed to do that. The only way that we can give out that information would it be if there was a court order subpoena. And even with that subpoena, our lawyers, so every school district has a legal team that specializes in looking at documents and subpoenas. They would have to determine whether the subpoena is even valid. So for example, If a police officer, and this isn't new, if a police officer came to the school and said, we have a situation and we need the address of a student in your school because we're looking for the father, we cannot give that police officer the information. We are not allowed to. So just so you know, also, we're not allowed to give out anyone's immigration status. And most of the times, we don't know a student's immigration status unless you tell us. Because as I mentioned before, you are now required to tell us. So just so you know, so we're not going to give that information because we may not know. And if you share that information with us, we are not allowed to give out that information. So there are times that schools will put a directory together like in class, if kids want to invite each other to parties and stuff like that, you would need to give permission for us to give out your name and your phone number or email. We do not freely give that out. And that's if you're in a school that has a parent association and they want to send out information. All that stuff is permission. If we violated that, we could lose our jobs. So this kind of continues. So if you are in a school district that actually has a school resource officer or any kind of school safety security. So while we work in collaboration with these folks, they also are not entitled to that information unless that information is needed because we have a safety situation in the building. So if a student at home said that they were going to do something against the school, they said that they were going to come to the school and commit the violence, for example. That's a different situation. We might then need to share information because we want to make sure that the school is safe. But part of the sharing of information is not your immigration status. That has nothing to do with whether a student may commit an act of violence or whether a student was doing something that would put the security of the school in jeopardy. That has nothing to do with immigration status. That has to do more with safety and security of the buildings. And so just continuing with that. So again, the status of a student, it's not something that's considered under FERPA. So going back to FERPA, a legitimate educational purpose. So again, when we share information about your child or families, it would be because we need it in order to support a child. So an example of that would be if we had a student who maybe needed counseling, if we had a student that maybe Child Protective Services was called against the family, we would share that information with them because that agency is going to help the family and make sure that they get services. That would be something different. But it's not to cooperate with ICE and it's not to cooperate with law enforcement. We're not allowed to do that. Unless, again, there was some kind of documentation that came from a federal judge. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. So again, law enforcement. So that's police. And this isn't new. This has always been the case. A police officer cannot come into a school without the permission of a parent. Any child that is under the age of 18, because under the age of 18, that's a child, police cannot come in and cannot question that child without a parent. Okay, cannot come in and arrest the child without the parent's permission. So I just want you to know that because people think that police officers can just come in and take children out of the school. They cannot do that. They can't even question children without the permission of a parent. Okay, so I just wanted to make it clear. In addition, if a police officer wanted any kind of information, like I said before, they would need actually a warrant. So if there was a crime that was committed and they wanted information, let's say they couldn't find the person, but they knew the person had a child in school, we wouldn't be allowed to give them that information unless they went to a judge and they got a warrant. And just so you know, anytime a warrant is given, we are not lawyers. So I am not a lawyer. We would have to call our own lawyers and ask them to look at the information. And that takes time. So that may be that they may not get an answer on that day. They may have to leave and come back the next day. Because again, we're not lawyers. And until our lawyers actually look at paperwork, we are not allowed to release any children, cooperate with anyone outside of the school district. So there are judicial warrants. So a judicial warrant actually comes from a judge. So I want you to know the difference with that. And that would be in a situation where a crime is being committed. Someone being in the country without documents is not considered a crime. Okay. Someone doing something illegal, like stealing something, that's a crime. That's a different thing. So someone being in the country without documentation is not considered a crime. Right. So just to talk about those two things. So an administrative warrant. So this is again, if federal authorities direct federal officials to arrest someone to remove them because they're in the country without documentation. Again, being undocumented is not a crime. Okay, it means that you're not here with permission, but it is not a crime and it's not considered a criminal offense. That's very different than again, a warrant because someone committed a crime in the United States, like broke penal code. Now, an immigration retainer, that's something different. It really wouldn't fall within schools, but this is something that has to do with if someone were to be picked up because they didn't have paperwork and they're allowed to hold them for 48 hours. Again, so that's a different thing. That's not something that would even come into our schools. And the reason I'm even bringing this up is that you may hear information where they'll say, oh, they can go to the school with this paperwork and take your child. No, that is something that would be rejected because that has nothing to do with our children. Okay. And then again, before anyone could take any action, I just wanted to assure you that any paperwork that comes to us, we do not act on anything unless our lawyers look at the paperwork. Okay. So I wanted to cover bullying and harassment because believe it or not, a child's immigration status, not that anyone needs to know, is protected. So a child in school cannot be bullied because of their immigration status. So if your child were to come home and say that people were calling them names or making fun of their status, that is considered bullying and harassment. And you have a right to contact a school and file a complaint for bullying if that is happening to your child. That is not something that's allowed. So just because your immigration status may be that you're still, again, it could be that you are undocumented. It doesn't mean that people get to make fun of your child for it. It doesn't mean that you don't have a right as a family to put in an actual complaint. So I wanted people to be clear that is covered under the Dignity for All Students Act. So don't think that you have to tolerate that. And that includes if there are teachers or administrators who are saying things against your family or your child. They are not allowed to do that, including using terms like illegal. Illegal is not a proper terminology. So if that is happening, again, that is considered bullying and harassment. Okay. And then here, detention or deportation of student family members. So again, students, regardless of their immigration status, they may have parents, guardians, or other members who have been detained or deported. So if we were to find out that someone in the family, unfortunately, was detained or was being deported, one of the things that we would encourage is for families to reach out to schools so that we're able to support the entire family. We would not disclose anything, but we want to make sure that the child had everything that they needed in school so that they're able to still access the education, and that may be that you may need like extra school materials. It may need that we may need to look at transportation. So there are a lot of ways that we can support families, but we can't support families if we don't know what's going on. So please know that and this is offered to any student that was in crisis. And we feel that any member of a family being deported or being detained is crisis, and we are here to help. So we would be able to help the family. Okay. So in the slide deck, there are these websites that you're able to access that are there to also help. They have information. Hudson Valley Auburn helps all of our English language learners. They have a lot of resources for families as well as educators. I know there's some educators who may be here today. And if you have a
Mhm.
large group of students who are English as a new language learners, I would recommend that you go on to the Hudson Valley Arbor organization because they are amazing. Colorín Colorado is also another website for educators, families, and for students. So there's a lot of information on there. There's also these two other sites that I'm just going to show you. I wanted to just talk a little bit about ChatGPT for any student that may be on the call. So I
Quick
know that,
question. I'm
yeah,
sorry. After your presentation, would you mind copying and pasting these links only because,
yes, absolutely. Yeah,
okay,
I'm ready to
okay.
do that. Absolutely. I just wouldn't want to have to stop and reshare. So, but ChatGPT, I know a lot of school districts, it's blocked, right? Because you're not allowed to use it at school. But that doesn't mean that you can't use it at home. And there are ways that you can use it that it's not considered cheating. Okay. So one of the ways is, and this is an example, if you happen to be in an algebra class, one of the things that is most critical for all students to be able to understand the content of their classes is to understand the vocabulary that is being introduced in those classes. And this is an example. If you are in Algebra 1, there's a lot of vocabulary in that coursework that is, if you don't know what it means, it's going to prevent you from
I'm so
understanding the
confused.
class.
So
So in ChatGPT, you can actually go on and I actually put what the prompt you can type in. So I typed in, please create a chart of vocabulary words for Algebra 1 with definitions in English, Spanish, and Haitian Creole. And what it did was it created this whole chart for me. And now there's a study guide. So I can see what the word is in English, what it is in Spanish, what it is in Creole, and it gives me the definition. You can also ask it to give you the definition in English and your native language. The other thing that I will point out is that if you notice, some of the vocabulary words that you're seeing are the same, whether it's in Spanish or in Creole. And that's important because if you know what it means in your native language, it means the same thing in English. And those are called connates. And there's a lot of words in our educational system that are the same in English and multiple languages. And again, if you know what they mean in your native language, it means the same thing in English. So that's just like a little hint for you. The other thing is, so I pulled out, this is again, another way that you can create on ChatGPT. So I looked at a piece of text. This was a story. This is actually from To Kill a Mockingbird. So I took a passage out of To Kill a Mockingbird and I used that particular book because that's one of the required readings in a lot of English classes. And when you go into high school, you have to read the book, whether it's in eighth grade or usually it comes up in 10th grade. If I wasn't sure as a student what all the vocabulary was, it would be very hard for me to understand the story. So you can actually take parts of the book, put it into ChatGPT and say, pull out the key vocabulary from this text with definitions in English. And here for this demonstration, I said Spanish because if I was more fluent in Spanish, and it pulled out all the words from that chapter that are important for me to understand, and it gave me the definition in English and it gave me the definition in Spanish, and now I have an understanding. And that isn't, and I did that all on ChatGPT. The other thing, Google Images. I mean, we Google things all the time, but believe it or not, you can put in vocabulary words just on the images part, and it'll give you a visual of those vocabulary words. And when you have a visual, it gives you a better understanding of what you are learning. There are a lot of teachers who will do this for you, but in case, again, it is about empowerment. You have to take your education and you have to become an advocate for yourself. And if your teachers are not doing this for you, these are things that you can do for yourself or you can share with your teachers. The other thing is Google and Bing actually have a feature that you can translate slides. So I'm going to actually stop sharing for a minute. And a lot of people don't realize that Google has this feature. You just have to do it as an extension. So let's say you are in class, you're a student, right? You're in class and teachers love doing slides like I'm doing right now, right? If you go up here to extensions, can everyone see that? Like, can everyone see my slide that it has the, okay. You go to extension. and you scroll down, there's something called slide translator. And if it's not there, you can actually find it here on extensions, and it comes up as something that you can actually select and add it to your slide deck. But under slides translator, I can go here, hit translate, and on the side, it's going to pop up. Hold on. In what language do I want the slides translated? So I can select the language here, whatever the language is. When I click on that and then click on all slides, it will translate the entire slide deck into another language. So if your teachers are using, for example, Google Classroom, and they're sending you things in English, and you are still struggling with English, you can actually hit that translator and it'll translate all the slides for you. If you're not able to, if you don't have editor mode, so if the teacher shares it with you, you can actually make a copy of the slide deck and then you can translate it. And the reason that I wanted to show that is because a lot of times teachers don't even know they can do this. But if you know that you can do this for yourself, so right now, if I hit that, all my slides will be translated into Spanish. And then I would be able to read them if Spanish was the language I was more comfortable in. All right. So I still have 3 minutes to go, so I'm going to stop it here. Any questions? I wanted to make sure I had some time for questions.
This was amazing. Wow. And again, for those that are parents or guardians or titi aunts, this is good information when you accompany for certain school visits or anything of such, or even giving advice. So we're opening for questions for those that may have a question. We have some educators here.
And if there are any educators here, what I would say is there are a lot of programs that we're using in our schools, a lot of resources. And a lot of times we don't realize all the different features within those programs that actually can support our ENL students. So for example, if you are in a district that uses Curriculum Associates iReady, iReady can actually be given to students in their native language in Spanish. They're working on other languages, but it's something that's very simple. The teacher can go in and change the language. And all of a sudden now students have access to all the resources that are on there. The same thing is if you're using stars, if you're using maps. And I think that's important because a lot of times we don't know we have this information. And if there are administrators who are on this, one of the things that I would encourage you to do, if your districts are looking at different programs to bring in to the district, one of the things that you should always consider is how are we supporting English language learners with youth product? What are the features and how do I access those features? Okay, because if we're not asking about it, the companies are not going to tell us. And this is not just for for ENL students, but also our special education students as well, because a lot of things within these programs that can support, I like to call them our exceptional learners, our diverse learners. But if we don't ask, we don't know. And I think it's our responsibility to make sure that anything that we bring into our district, that all of our students can access it, not just the students who are in general education. And if there's any students here who have any questions for me regarding some of the IA stuff that I showed you and how you can use it in school without getting in trouble, you can ask me. Because again, it is not cheating to use ChatGPT in the way that I told you to use it.
Amazing. Amazing. Anyone else?
I wanted to ask a question because I'm on the other side. I work in the state of New Jersey for a school district, and we're seeing kids transition from New York to New Jersey, and with the understanding that they don't want to be where they were identified as, as their residents. I'm concerned as to what messaging they're receiving in their community, that's driving them to leave, a place that they're where they're comfortable, and then moving in with or doubling up, tripling up sometimes with other families
Yeah.
in regard.
I would say to that, unfortunately, so New York State is very interesting because for a long time we thought that New York State was blue. And New York State is really purple. And I think now more than ever, because if you look at the results of the last election and you look at the map, really the New York State went, the the votes went to the Democrats only really because of four areas, and that was New York City, parts of Dutchess, so only four areas. The other areas were really red. So we have areas, for example, where I live in Orange County. It's a very conservative area, and I think not all school districts within that county is providing the information that I provided today. The district that I work in actually sent this information out to all of our parents, even though we have a very small ENL community. But the entire county of Dutchess, actually, all the superintendents got together as a cohort and created the same document to send out to all their families, even though they do have pockets of people that are very conservative leaning. You have, unfortunately, a situation in New York City where there was this optics of that the mayor perhaps was cooperating. I'm going to be very polite, cooperating with immigration, customs, and enforcement. So you can imagine when this is happening in the biggest school system in the world, it's probably why you're seeing some of these families fleeing, because there's a feeling now of being unsafe, right? So that's where, even though you have the commissioner of New York State and you have Letitia James, the attorney general, coming out with this very powerful statement and really reiterating that they were going to stand behind our students, right? But unfortunately, not everyone heard that message. Not everyone's going on the New York State website. Not everyone's watching the same kind of news outlets and stuff like this. So I think this information, if the districts are not providing it, they're not getting it. And that's probably why you're seeing this coming over, which is unfortunate.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Udecindo Neo. And